Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here, with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 8.52. Well, let's continue. Maybe a little too fast. Okay, we won down here, good, and depth charges have advanced. That is most excellent. It helps us with our anti-submarine warfare. Okay, we're pushed forward quite fairly well on all of that. Let's see, we will go with improve the engines there. Don't really like the limiting of building my motor torpedo boats. Small fuel tank research, and that would be aircraft. Well, let's switch this over to here too. How are we doing down here in the Horn of Africa? Let's see if we can go back on the offensive there. Yeah. Good. Good. That'll be good outcome, I think. Okay, yeah, so we've got Khartoum back, and it looks like we'll be able to hold it. Well, I'm sort of surprised. Well, I don't know if I'm surprised. Yeah, I know I am surprised because I guess I crushed it so fast, but the Greeks are still holding out. That is most excellent, and it looks like most of the Germans are leaving the theater. That's what I'm interpreting that. So, Italians have done a landing, it looks here. But the Greeks may be able to. Well, they're all way under strength, of course. On mountain divisions, but if they could hold out, it's sort of now a little bit of factories there. That will be somewhat useful. Hopefully they can hold out. That will tie up at least the Italians. Okay, jungle warfare equipment. Excuse me. That's very nice because we are going to have continuing adventures in the tropics. I'm quite sure of. Okay, extreme terrain combat, that will be nice. Whether it's in Africa, though, we're cleaning up the Italians, or the Burma, Malaya, and other theaters will most assuredly be helpful. Okay, the 39th Indian Division forms. The 39th Indian Division has been reactivated in Toungoo, Burma. Okay, historically the 1st Burma Infantry Division was formed July 41. 10th Division was of British Burma Army. On the outbreak of the war, the division was commanded by Major General Bruce Scott. It consisted of the 1st and 2nd Burma, the 3rd Indian Infantry Brigade. Changed to Indian formation at the end of the 42 campaign, while the majority of the Burma Army was reconstituted elsewhere in India. Okay, excellent. And the 14th Indian Division forms. In Quetta, India, the division was raised in June 41 in Quetta, near Baluchistan. Sorry guys. The brigade was its badge was a depiction of a black and white of the Rangers Mountains. Okay. And the 10th Armored Division, that's just going to be a headquarters. Political Warfare Executive. I think I know a little bit about this, but let's read. Historically, during World War II, the Political Warfare Executive was a British clandestine body created to produce and disseminate both white and black propaganda with the aim of damaging enemy morale and sustaining the morale of the occupied territories. The executive was formed in August 1941, reporting to the Foreign Office. The staff came mostly from SO1, which had been until then the propaganda arm of the Special Operations Executive. The organization was governed by a committee initially comprising Anthony Eden. He was as it states here, Foreign Secretary, but he was a sort of the primary assistant to Churchill in many ways politically. Anthony Eden was very much part of the war cabinet, as it were. Berdan Brecken, Minister of Information, and Hugh Dalton, Minister of Economic Warfare, together with officials Rex Lepper, Dallas Brooke, Robert Bruce, Lockhart, has to be a Scotsman with a name like that, as chairman and later Director General. Randall Palmer, later replaced by Dalton, he was moved to become president of the Board of Trade. Yvonne Kirkpatrick as an advisor to the BBC and formerly diplomat in Berlin, also joined the committee, while Lepper left to become British ambassador to Greece. The main forms of propaganda were in the form of radio broadcasts and printed postcards, leaflets, and documents. The PWE created a number of clandestine radio stations, including Gustav Siegfried Eins, and Soldatensender Calais, and Kreutz Westsender Atlantic. Okay. Yeah, this was a very interesting group. I definitely didn't know the details of who was sort of heading it up, but they, like they said, they did a lot of black and white propaganda. Those are two different types of propaganda. White propaganda is propaganda that basically you acknowledge that you're doing, and it very well may be untruthful. I mean, always the best propaganda is basically truthful, just presenting your case in the best possible light, ignoring facts that may not be promoting your case, just telling the truth, but telling your side of the truth, as it were. But this white propaganda, to some degree, also lied, by, overstating the size of an invasion force or understating it or whatever. It wasn't entirely truthful necessarily, but it was what was to one degree or another, acknowledge, not necessarily that they were lying, but just that these were organs, like they mentioned the BBC, or other organs that were openly acknowledged that were Allied sources. The black propaganda is propaganda that, for quite some time after the war, was very top secret. Some of the stuff, just because post-war it was destroyed and we know very little about it, was operations that at the time looked like they were coming from other sources, not looking like they were coming from British or Allied sources. I don't know, I think maybe it's the Gustav Siegfried Eins, but one of the radio stations that they were operating, based in my understanding, and I think all of those were actually based in Britain, but they claimed to be other things. One of them was claimed to be in Bavaria, broadcasting out of Bavaria, secretly broadcasting out of Bavaria, and it was done from a perspective of a Nazi broadcast. And this was a die-hard, hardcore Nazi broadcast that was sort of done intermittently, as if it was a clandestine radio broadcasting operation to the public, and talking about how Hitler had betrayed the National Socialist Revolution, and how all the top Nazis were all traitors to their country and the Nazi cause, and trying to sound like an extremist Nazi, to sort of say that there was dissension within the Nazi hierarchy or the Nazi ideology. So some of this black propaganda was done very much as if it were trying to sound as if it were coming from Germany. They would also do things like get into occupied territories or into Germany and try to distribute false copies of newspapers in which the basic outline all looked correct to whatever the local newspaper was, but they would put disturbing facts or disturbing articles into it so that the people would read it, would at least initially think, and maybe continue to think, that somehow this was something that slipped out of the official German presses and caused confusion. So there was a lot of this black propaganda that was going on that looked like it comes from alternative sources, not from the British or the Allies. So they were doing a lot of this stuff going on. A lot of it was at the end of the war, the records of some of the black propaganda programs. And some of these newspapers and various obscene material, including some obscene material photos that we would call Photoshop today, but it sort of obviously more a physical process of like Hitler and Mussolini and various things like that they had been working on and distributing in different methods. Sometimes, from airplanes being scattered out over it, but other times trying to land and get it in through various resistance type cells and spread out more internally. A lot of that was just because it was embarrassing, because they didn't really want the world to know that the British were actively behind all this. They just had took a few truckloads of all these paperwork and whatever and just went and burned it all, because it was all super top secret, and just wanted to get rid of it and didn't even maintain a few examples post-war of what they were doing for later archival purposes. So, but we know what some of it was. Some of it we have descriptions of. Some of it was saved. Few individual copies here and there. But so we know the type of stuff that they were doing. And so they were doing a lot of that. So that's what now we would call today, instead of political warfare executive, we call it like psychological warfare executive or whatever. SOE, that used executive at the time. But so that's what we would think of it in. It was very much a psychological warfare element. I don't know how effective it was. You had Lord Haha broadcasting out to Britain that, especially once Britain got over the shock of the Dunkirk and the initial post-Dunkirk reaction to it, that the Brits mostly joked about Lord Haha and listened to him, and quite openly and quite publicly in pubs and other places. But we're all just having a laugh at it because they didn't buy his propaganda lines. So I don't think it substantially lowered the morale, and may have actually increased British morale. And then you have Tokyo Rose, who was really I think 3 different women out of Japan, broadcasting stuff primarily to the Americans, that because they, particularly there, and I presume also on the Lord Haha station, but Tokyo Rose particularly broadcast a lot of popular American music, so the soldiers in the theater could often tune in and get that. And they too sort of laughed at, or that was more of a set of the over the top statements that Lord Haha was using. She was doing three women were doing more seductive stuff, so it was more not so much laughed at, but it wasn't convincing the American soldiers, I don't think, substantially to not fight harder, not fight hard kind of thing. One of the women from Tokyo, one of the women who was Tokyo Rose, there were, like I say, I think it was 3 of them. She was Japanese, who was a Japanese American who was in Japan at the time that the war started, and was somewhat forced to do this thing. And I think she let a few things slip that she shouldn't have done at different times to sort of help the American cause. But what she actively did was work to get food and other things to prisoners of war, American particularly, but Allied prisoners of war in Japan. And so she was sort of fighting a one-woman resistance campaign in Japan while doing the broadcast, and she was tried but found not guilty of committing treason because she, like I say, she was an American citizen. When all this sort of came out at the trial, that she was captured, that she had been and going to the prisoners of war camp, I think to some degree she was sort of explaining it to her Japanese masters, as it were. Going to go interview the soldiers or go find out what they're thinking, that in the prisoner of war camp. But she'd bring bundles of food and other things to give to them as doing this, so she had access. So she was helping them out considerably and bringing medicine and other things. That the other 2 that were Japanese, I think the other 2 were Japanese women who had lived or whatever in and around Americans, so that they could speak with an American accent. But they were Japanese as opposed to Americans of Japanese descent. So since that wasn't terribly effective, I don't know how effective this black propaganda was in Germany, and I don't think very effective. Now, of course, once you get the Germans crossing the Rhine, or the Americans crossing the Rhine, or whatever, moving into Germany, and the war looks lost, a lot of the older soldiers were definitely willing to give up the fight. The young ones were so indoctrinated into the Hitler Youth, they were still believing until the last days that the Wunderwaffe, the wonder weapons, were going to be out any day now, and they were going to start winning the war again, just because they've been indoctrinated to believe such. Now, I do think part of the American propaganda that I see looking at World War II movies made during World War II, they were always very sympathetic to the Italians. One, as I mentioned before, that fascism was quite popular in America. You look at one Rockefeller Plaza, or what the Rockefeller building in New York City. And you go look all over it, and there's fascist symbols all over it. Now, they're not all fascisti, bundles of sticks and the axe, but they're various pro-Mussolini stuff just built into the building, and because the Rockefeller was very much, and this was before the war started, admiring fascism and Mussolini. So in the 20s and the 30s, fascism, not that they were necessarily wanting to be fascist, but they were definitely wanting to move into that direction. They were, progressivism, definitely, there is a fascism is a type of progressivism. And so fascism was looked, as opposed to the progressivists that were looking towards the Soviet Union. Some of them were looking, the progressives were looking towards Mussolini. So that was quite popular. Plus the very large communities of Italian Americans that they were trying to obviously motivate to join, and once they were drafted and whatever, to serve in the American army, but also willing to fight their cousins or brothers or whoever that might be that are living, literally cousins that one parent moved to America, one child moves to America, the other child stays in Italy, so they have close relatives still living in Italy, and there's quite a lot of them there willing to fight the Italians. So they definitely portrayed in America the Italian soldiers as sort of reluctant supporters of Mussolini. Now, I think that's to an extent quite true, because fascism never got as wide a popular support in Italy as not National Socialism did in Germany. So there was definitely a truth to that. And so it's sort of, I think, I do think that there was a significant element of Italians that were reluctant to be fighting in this war. So I think propaganda of white or black types can be more effective where you have soldiers that are going, why are we fighting, kind of thing. They don't care why they're fighting if they're winning. But once you're no longer winning, what's the purpose of the war? I think that's why the Italians collapsed much more quickly. And you got to remember, the German army was walking around with eagles and swastikas on their chests. The regular army, I'm talking about the Waffen SS, where the Italian was still very much the Royal Italian Army. So it was the King's Army. There were, and is very much so, fascist units attached to army divisions, fascist divisions at times. And of course later you had the Italian Social Republic up here on the top, which was very fascist. Government, I don't know that, I'm not saying the populace, I'm saying the government was. So you had strong elements in the leadership of the army considered themselves royalists and traditionalists and not fascists. And so if the fascist leader and his war that he got them into isn't working, they were willing to go, okay, we're out. Let's see what sort of settlement we're going to get, so long as I think they would be thinking, so long as we're going to keep core Italy, whatever that might mean at the time, meaning obviously they lost after post-war, territories to Yugoslavia and whatnot. But if we're keeping core Italy as our own country, fine, we're willing to sign any sort of reasonable peace treaty. So once you have that viewpoint at the top, once things aren't going well, you start losing motivation. So I think where you have non-strong leadership, not strong unity of purpose, propaganda can work well. So that's where you'll find that kind of stuff, I think, work better. Okay, let's see. Lose some supplies and some money. We can afford both of those and that thing. Good. Counterintelligence plus. Okay, we'll do that. At least that's my assessment of it. Of both the effectiveness of propaganda and of the sentiments at the time. Okay, we'll move you back up into the line. Okay. Let's move these over here. Now, is he a good commander? Yes. Alright, as soon as you're ready, we'll move you up into the line now. Okay, and got lots and lots of fighters coming. Now let's build another armored division. Now I think we're getting a bunch of those colonial divisions, and hopefully those will be good. So yes, another armored division. So I'm also thinking, obviously, of confronting the Japanese and sticking some armored divisions. The jungles may not be the most best choice or whatever for where to, what type of units to fight in the jungles. Okay, Consolidated Catalina flying boat. These are great, in my opinion, great flying boats, and technically they are all flying boats. Difference, if you don't know, this is a boat that flies theoretically. The other is a seaplane. The distinction is that the whole of the flying boat lands in the water. A seaplane has floats on it below it that land in the water, so the plane element itself doesn't touch the water. It's sort of, the equivalent of the wheels going to the water. Now this is what's pictured here is obviously an amphibious version, though they did make that were pure flying boats, meaning they could only take off and land in the water. This had landing wheels that would come out and you could land in regular. Most of the Catalinas were built as amphibious, but about maybe a quarter of them, maybe not that many, were pure water aircraft, but these could also land on a standard airport. Okay, the Consolidated Catalina flying boat would be a very useful maritime and naval patrol plane. We can order some from the USA, absolutely. They were used to fly. There was one scheduled, I think it was like twice weekly from, where's Perth? Is this Perth? No, actually, where's Perth? Yeah, I keep missing Perth. I know it's over here. From, I think, Perth or one of the places on the west coast of Australia, flying, it was either like to India or wherever, some very long flights that were for the military only during this time, but as scheduled flights that would carry passengers, but it was like 4 passengers maximum because they'd stripped everything else out of the aircraft weight-wise and loaded everything up as much with fuel as much as they could to extend the range. And so there was that and a few other, most of the similar ones were, would sort of island hop, in that they would refuel at the different islands, but this was like a one super long stretch. And so they were using those around as long-range liaison aircraft, as well as eventually some. They would also sort of do the up through, Iceland, Greenland into the U.S. that would fly people that needed to go around militarily. I don't think so much like soldiers on leave, but guys carrying important papers, things that you don't want to put in the mail, even the military mail, and things you don't want to send over the radio kind of stuff, and other sort of officers that needed to get to their new assignments rapidly or whatever, and so that they were used in that form as sort of an extreme long-range aircraft, because the model was such that at least it could fly on one of its two engines. Right up in here you can see a little window there, and sort of the engineer of the aircraft could access the engines to some degree. Obviously you can't take them apart and repair them while you're flying, but certain repair and maintenance elements and adjusting the engines it could do during flight, and so if you needed to, you could shut one down. I don't know that it could take off on one engine, but it could fly on one engine. Maybe it could take off if you lightened, not carrying too much fuel or something, but so it could manage on one engine for a considerable amount of time, though it was best to do it on two. And so these were really set up to be a long-range operation, as well as that, compared to like the Sutherland flying boat, which was a bit bigger, but it had nowhere near the range. It was a excuse me, reasonably good ranges, but that's around here, where this is something that could range way out here. It's sort of like the Condor that the Germans used, maybe a bit more range, I think, with the Condor. I don't keep all these in my head, but obviously Condor didn't have the seaplane aspect, and it was before the modern age, shall we say, or this age. A lot of places, one of the famous ones, which the Pan Am boats, is this Wake? Yeah, Wake Island. Wake Island doesn't look anything like this. Wake Island is hollow in the middle, basically. It's sort of a coral reef that appeared above the ocean enough. And so at least the early stages, and I think up through the war, I think they did have an airstrip at some point. Pretty sure they did. But the big flying boats that Pan American was flying to China would come in and land here, land in the water, either inside the lagoon area or very nearby it, and come in, and so that they could use these various islands that didn't have prepared runways, so you could move around through that, as well as the thought, and in some cases it would work, is that if you're halfway between here and here and you're having enough engine trouble or whatever, and you're not going to make it, you can land your boat, and if you don't have a problem while landing and there isn't a major storm, you can land your boat and you'll be fine. And if you have power enough going at that time, you could presumably, because they had fairly strong transmitters, especially using just basic Morse code, you could pound out your location and, hey, ships come and get us, kind of thing. Nearby steamship or whatever would come and rescue them. So there was the thought that if it wasn't some storm that's going on that causes you to crash, or some other traumatic element to the plane, but just simply engine conks out and don't have enough power, to some of the more commercial flying boats were 4 engines or whatever, didn't have enough power. Also could be running a lot of headwinds, and so you're burning fuel a lot more than you anticipated or whatever. So it was thought to be safer that you could land out at sea. So for a lot of the long range stuff, they were using flying boats. Was quite popular at the time. Okay, so yes, absolutely, we want those. Okay, we're going to send it back. And it looks like they've arrived. Okay. Let's say where I didn't pay attention. If it did say. And let me know if you think I'm going too long. Okay, a bunch of these things here on some of these things, but not those. Okay. There we go. Okay, they're here. Just basically 0 strength. Let's give them an officer. There we go. Attach them to coastal command. CCR. Okay. Yep, they even have the right photo. So, and I think they have done so. Black Ice team is very good, but they've tried to pick the correct model that would represent the flying boat, which may be more advanced than what you would normally build. But they're very good. And so I've been recently watching a lot of the different YouTubers. Some that are, well, few of them are a bit more of a Hearts of Iron types that are playing Hearts of Iron 4, and I do think they're going to do a little better playing Hearts of Iron 4 than some of the another Eagle Squadron. One at the RAF. So was the 3rd Eagle Squadron with Hawker Hurricanes. Of course, the Eagle Squadrons are Americans joining the RAF. So absolutely. So the Hearts of Iron guys that are there, that are playing the Hearts of Iron 4 recently, I think are going to do a much better job compared to some of the big guys. And I could be naming names, but I don't want to criticize them. If whatever I sound maybe sounding critical, you'll know who they are if you paid attention. Some of the the really big guys that are sort of EU4 players, some of them just aren't that good. Some of them are I'm not talking about good as doing a performance of playing a game for you guys. They're great at that. They're better at that than I am. I'm not going to try to do that, but they're not necessarily going to get Hearts of Iron 4 well, and that it's more of a war game that is on the grand strategic level. But at least from a lot of the current watching that I've seen, some of them they're more of a empire building strategy kind of players, which is it's a different thing. Engine. Okay, so that gives us the basic engine for all the types. Let's move this up to here. Some of those people aren't, I don't think, playing so well. Again, I say that I think they're I don't want to say it's Quill 18 particularly, I think explains things really well. He's talking about the screens and what they're hitting, and he, because I'm not being critical, so I will mention his name. He's doing a really good job at trying to explain what he's doing. Maybe the bit of critical part, I don't know how well he's going to do compared to what he would be doing with something like EU4, which he's most excellent at. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to stand out and be different. If you like Quill 18 and his style, or one of the other people and you really like their styles, and if I just copy them, why would you listen to me over somebody you already like and who probably does it better? But so that's sort of, I want to be a bit different. Okay, we still got a lot of these in production, and we got massive amounts, even though we've been losing some. So we don't need any more of those. So that's sort of why I went going on about some of these other detailed things, and I know a bunch of you already know this stuff, because that's why you're sort of watching, but I'm hoping I'm still interested in another armored division. Okay, Indian Army recruiting. Let's see what we're doing there. 42, 42. Okay, those go very fast because they're only difficulty of 1. They're just basically to try to space them out so we don't do, you know, have them all show up in 1936 or something. Looking for 41 technologies just to make sure we are being the most efficient as we can. With Germany, I do push things, certain technologies, sooner, either because I think they did it historically, or I just want them out there sooner, better, quicker, faster. We got LM basing advance as well. It's here. Okay, we'll let that continue. Now, we should have the Indian Army recruits. There we go. This is more Indian Army units. The ones that are event driven. I think that's the new one. Scott from that. Yep, that's what it is. Yeah, I didn't recognize the number from one of the other. Let's give it a commander. Now we have this one here that's organizing itself up. Let's give these guys commanders, so once they go into action, it's a rather decent division, so it's not laziness on the Black Ice team's part for sure. That's why they're not like assigning the historical commander to it. What it is, and I know this for a fact from doing other things, is that if they were to specify, let's say this Harry Williams, if he was the historical commander of that division, specify it, and the AI had already assigned it previously to another division, the AI never goes back in and checks to see if there's a unit that doesn't have a commander and should be assigned another one. So you sort of lose it. So that's why that these events are designed to be used both for the human playing of the nation, as well as the AI, and so they do a good job with that. So troops there. We'll send the light infantry to there because it's empty. We'll do that before the bad guys do. If not, they at least won't be entrenched. It makes me almost want to send stuff to here, but they seem to be doing reasonably good without the Germans. Yeah, the Germans are totally bugged out. Notice the Germans did do a good job carving their way down into there. But Barbarossa has started. You can see I'm making a little headway here. This is again I think a AI problem in that this looks like the Romanians probably are doing well there. is that the AI doesn't know that it's coming. So they may have a, you know, a garrison force along the Soviet border here, but unlike the human player who shifts all of his, you know, great bulk of his army over here to get ready for it, the AI doesn't. So it's sort of almost like a Soviet surprise attack on them. Maybe also equally a surprise to the Soviets, but the Soviet AI. So we have some units, a few units of good organization, but not many. So we need to make sure we're sending back in some. I moved a few garrison units just in case they somehow push me out of here. I don't want them to regain any of these ports, not even for a moment. So that's sort of the problem with some of this stuff. I can talk to you about some of the stuff I've been seeing with the coming after Monday with Hearts of Iron 4. You of course can look at the different Let's Play stuff. But just, I guess, to get technical with you guys a little bit, because I know a few of yours, I've noticed definitely the viewing, at least currently the viewership is down because everybody's checking out the, and I understand, Hearts of Iron 4 stuff. I've been checking at least some of it out too myself. Looking at all of that, is what I've been playing of Hearts of Iron 4 is a beta copy, which been informed is different than the press copy, and not just a label. It's actually a different version of the game, and that's sort of why I can't really talk about it, because I might be talking about something different than what you're seeing there, if in just slight elements or something. So that's why I can't show anything early, is because I would be showing you the beta and not the press release version of the game. But once I get my normal copy, which is what you guys will be getting, then I can start playing that and talking about that and showing you that version of the game. Oh good, looks like they've finally broken. Okay, let's see if we get some units that are somewhat organized. So I want to hit them as hopefully as disorganized as possible. And hopefully they'll just shatter quickly here. I'm not saying they will, but that's my hope. A lot of units there. But, oh, well, there. And they just all shattered. Great. Penzance. We've killed the Germans of Penzance, the pirates of Penzance. Okay. So, well, we gotta let these guys get organized up and get ready for an invasion of Shetland up here. Take out these units. Well, that's been a hard fight. Okay, well, we're going to end the episode there. Thanks for liking the videos. Thanks for watching, of course. Please post comments. Like I've been saying, we'll see about keeping this going if you guys are still interested. See you next time.